Well, friends, we just received word today that Germany looks like it's going to be closing its borders as early as Monday. They have plans to start imposing border controls at their land borders on Monday. And to give you an idea of how big of a deal this is, they are going to be violating the Schengen Treaties, which is a big deal. 29 countries across Europe are part of the Schengen zone. Now, the Schengen zone basically allows free transfer of people. It's basically like in the United States, how you can move from one state to the next without actually going through a checkpoint. In Europe, if you've ever traveled between Schengen countries, you've noticed that there's no border control, there's no passport control, you don't get a stamp, you just pass right on through. It's in a lot of places, there's just a line on the ground. There is no actual border. But Germany has said starting Monday that they are going to start imposing land border controls, where they're going to start checking people's passports and such on land borders going forward, which is a big deal. Now, they're saying this is going to be a temporary emergency measure for 6 months, but this is a really big deal. Now, I just came from Iceland. Now, I was a little surprised that Iceland was actually part of the Schengen zone. I didn't know that. I'd never been there before, but so flying from Iceland to Norway here was like a domestic flight inside the United States. That's pretty cool. So we have this breakdown from this European Union, this Schengen zone where free trade is happening, the European Union with the euro. We see all these European institutions starting to fall under sway. We have, and there's good reasons for that. We'll get into that. But we've had this trajectory where we've moved from nation states towards this European country. With its own military, with its own currency, with its own government. But now it seems like we're starting to move away from it, and Germany is not a small player. Germany is the largest economy inside the EU. So when they start violating the rules that they've agreed to, this is a big deal. They are not allowed under Schengen to impose border controls. They're not allowed to stop people, require paperwork for people moving across their border. Not allowed to do it, and yet they're going to do it anyway. This is a big deal, and we're also probably going to be seeing some other countries following suit very shortly. What instigated this? There was a high-profile incident with a young girl where she was knifed, and because of that, as well as a major scandal that has broken out about the government of Germany basically giving refugee status to anyone crossing the border. So basically what's happening in the United States, where anyone crossing the border is getting refugee status in the United States. Basically, Germany got caught doing that, and that has caused this major backlash. Say what you will about the Germans, is that they don't like being lied to, and they have a much more sensible, practical approach to things when it doesn't make sense at all, like in the United States, where everything is happening with the immigration doesn't make sense at all. All right, so September 16th, they're going to impose border checks on its land border, emergency measures for 6 months. But here's the deal. We're seeing that some other countries are going to follow suit. We're expecting Austria. Austria has already said some things that kind of make us think that they're going to impose those land borders as well, and kind of basically create a Schengen within a Schengen, or a country within a country. Where Austria and Germany are going to kind of both protect against Islamic extremism. That's what they've said. Now, we also expect that other countries are going to very quickly jump on board. We expect Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, and Croatia to jump on board. As soon as they've been given permission by Germany to do this, that hey, Germany's doing it, so hey, we're going to do that too. We're going to see a bunch of these countries jumping on board, and we see Switzerland out there. What is going on with Switzerland? They are saying that they are in a pre-war situation. That is very concerning. They are practicing locking down their border right now, which is serious. I mean, the fact that they're going to lock down their border and protect it. Now, they're not part technically of the EU, but the fact that they are preparing for war is concerning. And when it comes down to it, I think what they might be getting ready to do is shutting down their border, just like Germany. I think that they're going to basically do what Germany and Austria and these other countries are going to do. Just to give you kind of an idea what the Schengen area is kind of like, I was just in Iceland, and I saw somebody hitchhiking, and they were looking for a ride, and so I pulled over and I gave this guy a ride. Turns out he was a French guy named Antoine, and Antoine is from France, okay? He's from France, he's in Iceland. He's not a tourist in Iceland. He is living in Iceland and working in Iceland, and he was getting from one side of the island where he had his seasonal job, and he had to get to the other side of the island where his next seasonal job was going to pick up. And he does stuff with the fishing and stuff. So an interesting guy. I rode with him he rode with me for about 2 hours as we drove across Iceland, and very interesting conversation. We had a deep spiritual conversation with him and got to share with him about Jesus, how about Jesus is the one thing clean that can clean us from all of our guilt and our shame from the past. He wasn't really on board with that, but he was very much into, I want to pick and choose all of my philosophies and thoughts and everything like that. But just give you an idea of what the Schengen situation is like. It really is like states, where you have people who are working in other states in the country continent. So you have Frenchmen up in Iceland working as fishermen. You have when I remember when I was in Ireland a while back, I remember meeting a whole bunch of people that were there living in the hostel. I was just staying in the hostel as I was traveling through to get to Central Asia, but they were living in that hostel as they worked in Ireland. They weren't Irish. They were, I forget where the one guy was, and he was saying, yeah, that a bunch of people were coming to Ireland because Ireland lowered their corporate taxes, so that a whole bunch of corporations decided to move their European headquarters over to Ireland, and so a whole bunch of jobs went over to Ireland. Can you believe that? Lowering taxes actually creates jobs. I know, it's groundbreaking. The Europeans haven't quite figured this out yet, and the Irish decided that once they got all the corporations, they wanted to raise the tax rates. Some people just never learn, you know what I mean? But we got this. We got a number of other things happening out there, and I have to be a little bit careful because we are in Norway right now, and I'm actually looking at a whole bunch of people watching me shoot this video in this courtyard. I'm watching them all walk by. But Norway is very sensitive about the whole immigration and migrant issue, which it's kind of interesting because they're very hypocritical about it, of course. They're taking in only Ukrainians. So they're not allowing anyone from any other countries, just Ukrainians as refugees into their country. They're not allowing any other migrants to settle here, which is interesting, which explains why there's just basically just white people here. But that's the situation here in Oslo, Norway. You got some tourists and stuff like that, and people from other parts of the EU that are visiting that don't look like everybody else, but by and large, everybody looks like everybody else. And with the oil profits being used to fund the government, I know a lot of people do talk about Norway being like this socialist paradise. And in the sense that the government has put pretty heavy regulations and taxes on the oil and gas industry. So basically, kind of what Alaska does is what they do here. Alaska, the government actually gets a bunch of the revenue from the oil and gas production. And same thing here, where basically Norway gives a lease for a time to companies, and so the companies get to lease the oil field for a while, and then after a while it turns into basically the Norwegian government gets the project. So it then becomes owned by the Norwegian government. And it's kind of a long window out there, and they're just starting to get some of these big projects being turned over to them, where they just basically getting these free developments, and they've put a lot of money into hydroelectric dams and such. So there's reasons why the socialist dream here in Norway seems to work. But when you look at the actual tax burden on the average Norwegian, it's actually less than the tax burden on the average American, which is interesting to say the least. So they have lower taxes than the U.S. government, the U.S. does, and yet they're somehow this socialist utopia. But the simple fact is that it's like, you know, Saudi Arabia or Dubai or something like that, where they just have oil and it just makes everybody rich. And they're spreading it around a bit, and it's a very, very nice place. I'm very much enjoyed my time here. But just over to the next country over, we have Sweden. Now, Sweden has just announced, just yesterday, that they're going to start paying $34,000 to anyone who's willing to move back to their home country. What they should do is they should offer $34,000 for anyone willing to move back to their home country, because if you're willing to move back to your home country for $34,000, then clearly you're not a refugee. Because it's not that bad if that's the case. What should happen is that once they offer that to you and you accept it, you should get nothing. You should get nothing because you came in on false pretenses. That's Steve's opinion. That is not how any government will ever do that program, but they should definitely do it that way. You should admit essentially that you're not really a refugee, and then once they get you to admit that, then they take it away. But so you got all the free-ranging people moving across Europe suddenly are going to see these borders come up, and is that going to spell the end of the European experiment? Possibly. If Germany can just flagrantly violate the treaties when it comes to the Schengen zone and border controls, what's to stop other countries from doing the same thing with currency? What happens if they start just printing too many euros? Or what happens if they just overspend for their government once again and do it this way? What happens if they just violate all the rules themselves? Once you have one country out there, and yeah, sure, it's the big, powerful country, Germany, but once you have one country out there just flagrantly just violating the rules because they're like, we don't feel like following those rules anymore, what happens next with that? And what happens with Europe is certainly going to impact the United States of America. They are our biggest ally, really. Europe is basically a country. Let's all just admit it. Just like states are basically countries in the United States, so are the states of Europe are countries. Just limited powers, but with the way the European Union's been going and taking more and more power from all the independent countries, they've basically relegated themselves to states that have a little more power than the United States do. But can countries even leave? The UK tried, and they were moderately successful, and oh man, they got raked over the coals by the European Union to make sure that nobody else ever tries to do that again. And even the UK was not able to do a full breakup with the European Union. So we got some serious concerns about what's going on across the European Union when it comes to the immigration issues. They got all these people being moved in. Norwegians have been caught ferrying Africans across the Mediterranean Sea and dumping them off in Italy and over in Spain as well. So you got these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations supposedly going out there and basically just flagrantly violating the laws in order to kind of push this migrant agenda that we see in the United States, but it's also happening here in Europe. We saw more of the backlash here in Europe with high crime as they were importing a lot more Muslims. That clashed a lot more with the culture. Now the United States is seeing more Muslims and more Africans coming in, and now a lot of Haitians and such. That is starting to clash more with the U.S. culture than the Hispanics did, and that is starting to have more and more impact on, you know, pets and everything like that. But we're not allowed to talk about that here on YouTube, so we won't. Anyway, hopefully you can enjoy the sights here. This is Fortress Akershus. It was like the castle where the king would dwell, and they, you know, previous kings were buried here. Some of it is still a military base, where I believe that's because the remains of previous kings and such are buried here on the grounds. I believe that's what they're protecting. But the very, very peak of the fortress is where their base is, and our flag, and you know, just an ancient kind of place, and it's been updated many a time, and now it's mostly just a tourist attraction with some ceremonial roles. There's some restaurants and stuff like that built in to the building elsewhere, and it's just a bunch of old buildings. Very nice park for people just to kind of walk through, and that's what a lot of people are doing. All right, friends. I will be heading onward in my journey to the next place. We're heading to some very exciting places very shortly that I think are going to open your eyes about some things, and to really dig deep into some of the things going on over here in Europe that are definitely going to impact the United States. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.